Welcome, everybody. We are at the ITSA Topic Chats. Today is Thursday, September 2nd, 2021. I'm very happy to be joined by Jessica Sickler today. We are going to be talking about, you can probably see it on your screen there, the core session, hiring subcontractors and employees. This is a session I did once before, and then Jessica asked if she can join, or actually, I think one way or another, we decided to do this together. And so she's added quite a bit to it and added a lot of thought to it. And so I think it's going to be great today. So with that, we do have a big group of folks today, 27, which is wonderful. And so you're all welcome. As far as the YouTube channel is concerned, I guess I'm supposed to tell people to like and subscribe, but I'm not sure how to do any of that. So feel free to do that on your own time. One way or another, feel free to look through all the rest of the YouTube channel videos. I think we've got about 60 of them out there now. So by way of introduction, I'll introduce myself and then I'll pass it off to Jessica and she can introduce herself and talk through what we're going to talk about today. But I'm Matt Feldmann with Goshen Education Consulting, based in beautiful downtown Edwardsville, Illinois, which is in the Midwest. Oh, wait a second. What's that? I'm in the poll and share it with everybody. Midwest 1. We've got 7 people from the Midwest. And I'm not sure if that counts as Pittsburgh or not, but you choose on your own. Anyhow, I've had relative to today, I've had a consulting firm since I started it in 2009. I went full-time in 2011, and I hired my first grad assistant in about, I think it was 2016. I think it was 2016. And I had part-time employees, but I had my very first full-time real employee in May 2019. And right now we have a staff of 7, various between part-time, full-time. And I guess if you count all the subcontractors, I think we counted about 30, but there's some subcontractors who just do like one thing a year. All right, Jessica, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jessica Sickler. I am based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I have a small firm, J. Sickler Consulting. I have 2 full-time staff right now. The first one joined in 2019, and my second staff person joined in August. So I've just been through the hiring process yet again, so it's very fresh. And I've been in business for about 5 years in this form. And before that, I was managing staff and business at a nonprofit research group where I had even, different kinds of experiences hiring and managing staff. So all of that's sort of what feeds in. And as Matt said, we have sort of complementary experiences. We've each done things that the other hasn't in terms of hiring. So hopefully this will be helpful. Let's make that go. Oops, I don't know if I just messed up your poll. Matt, there we go. So there we go. So we're gonna, I think, run through these 5 different types of support, and we're gonna alternate who's talking about what based on our experience, and try to leave a lot of time for questions and conversation, because I know on this kind of topic, it's what you're worrying about or thinking about that's probably going to be most useful to you. So we're gonna start by talking about interns and student practicum as a way of getting additional support, staffing support for your company. I've done this when I was at a nonprofit firm, and the really awesome thing is it's a chance to work with and mentor young professionals, help them learn the skills of our field, and that can be really rewarding and great. Maybe I'm just a teacher at heart, but that part is really lovely. It is definitely lower cost than any of the other options we're going to talk about today, but as Tim Gunn would tell us, it's student work. So that's definitely a con, and you have to be really mindful of the quality and whether it may end up not being of use to you, depending on what it is. I will say mostly I used it when I was an in-house evaluator in a nonprofit. It was good for getting projects done that just might not get done otherwise. And we could sort of work with moderate quality. I can't really imagine using it for client work, although maybe a marketing class, would want to do a practicum to help you update your website or your branding, and you can take it or leave it at the end if it didn't suit you. It is definitely lower cost, but I do want to stress unpaid internships are not a thing. They are illegal if you are a for-profit company, at least in the US. That's all I can really speak to. And you need to either pay them minimum wage or they need to be receiving school credit, and the work they're doing needs to be meaningful. This is Department of Labor. I just like to stress it because I don't want people thinking you can get, gophers and copiers and data entry clerks for free on poor interns' backs. So that's sort of the take on interns and students. I'll hand it off to Matt now.
Right. One quick other thought is, and I think originally I put in there if people wanted to do pro bono work, and I think one way or another, if people are coming to do work for you, you want to make sure you're thinking through what's a contractor, what's legal, what's appropriate. We talk about doing pro bono work for other people all the time, and so I think there's options there, but I just, if people are doing things of value, and make sure you're compensating them appropriately, even if you're giving them an opportunity to do something that may have, for you, limited value. So make sure you're thinking through that. It's obviously something you want to think about with them. We talk about attorneys and lawyers, CPAs all the time. And so just an aside, you should probably have some of those people on your speed dial, who you need to talk to about certain things. But I would encourage you to think about, if somebody comes to you with a pro bono idea, you think it has limited value, but it may give them an opportunity, you think it could be a good big idea, think about, make sure you know what you're doing there. Clearly, one of those other things with all of that, you always want to make sure you have some sort of a contract or some sort of a document outlining what you're going to do with that. With grad assistants, the grad assistants, at one point in time, I thought I was going to build my firm around grad assistants. I would groom them and grow them, and they would become my employees. It didn't work out. But graduate assistants are fantastic opportunities for inexpensive labor. So from that piece, and the way it's set up with graduate assistants, you reach out to a local university, and you set up a relationship with a faculty member who is their technical supervisor, and they are, the way it is, at least with my university, they are loaned to me. I mean, I think technically they even use the word loan. You're going to get, it's going to be based upon just the luck of the draw, or how carefully you recruit. We have graduate assistants in one of our programs that I support, and they are extremely, extremely tough on who they hire, but they get some of the best grad assistants. In fact, some of the grad assistants that were ideal, I mean, really great, but they chose not to. I hired one, and I've been very happy with her. They are raw talent. I think this is kind of goes under the same header, the tin gun header. They are students, so they something that's going to take you an hour to do could take them 2 days. It is what it is. So you may want to think about that when you're hiring a person. They do take a lot of direction. Most likely, this frequently is their very first professional position. So they're coming in very much raw talent, as it says. But on the other end of things, you can mold them and you can shape them, and they may eventually become staff members. I think be careful which departments you're recruiting from, because, like, for instance, we've pulled a lot from psychology departments, and I love psychology because students come in with just a basic understanding for data. But your psychology students are coming in from industrial organizational psychology. You're going to be more aligned with the evaluation than perhaps adult clinical. And I have had students from adult clinical, and they've been great students, but they really don't have any interest in sticking around. And so even if they don't have an interest in sticking around, if they are in industrial organizational psychology, which is, I think, a great field for this, they generally have kind of an underlying basic interest in what you're doing. So think about that. And I'm not saying only go with IO psychology. Clearly, there's a whole variety of different people who can do great work. I think that I've been wanting to hire a grad assistant from English, just because they know how to write and think. So there's something to be said there. But I can't stress enough the importance on direction and supervision, and making sure you cover all those things that everybody should just understand, but they often don't, because they often have not had any professional position. Is there anything to add to that, Jessica?
No, I mean, I think that overlaps a lot with working with interns as well. You know, the more direction, more oversight. They're also learning work norms. So you're teaching them that side of things. It takes patience and all of that as well.
Okay, let's go to the next slide.
Right. So subcontracts. Now, for me, I will say this is, and I think for many people, this is the bridge before you hire your first employee. So for me, I started using some subcontractors in my practice when I had more work than I could do on my own, but I wasn't confident yet it would be sustained that I could have someone, you know, on payroll every month. So with a subcontractor, it is bounded. It is either project-based or there's some parameters around that support. And it's a great opportunity to get that sort of temporary, you know, plug in a hole, trial support. Or if you need a specialized skill set that you don't have on staff and you're not likely to continue needing, subcontractor is the ideal way to go to pull that person in as your partner, collaborator, or even junior staff if they're sort of filling in that role. Like I said, the relationship is focused and it needs those sort of bounds on it, on what their role and contribution is in a way that is different from an employee. And again, I'm going to go to some of those legal requirements we have to stay cool with the IRS and the Department of Labor, is that staff and employee staff relationships and a contractor relationship are different. And you want to review that checklist. That what makes a contractor, and giving them sufficient independence and scope of work and control over their conditions. You can't sort of if you're a micromanager, this is not going to be a good relationship for you. They are not staff for whom you don't pay taxes. And I just, that sometimes sort of gets thrown around. You just throw someone on a 1099 and that's really not the way that should be. But a great thing is they are really focused. They're focused on that project. They're delivering for you in that capacity, which can be great. And the financial obligation is temporary. So from the financial side, that is the upside. It's going to be a short time. They definitely do have less commitment to your firm because they're making their own livelihood and they're part of being a contractor. They are employed by lots of different people. So that is a thing to factor in. And I also like to stress again on sort of being an ethical employer, they actually should not per hour, per unit of work cost less than a staff person. In fact, they may actually cost more because they are responsible for their own taxes. They are responsible for their own time off. They are responsible for their own overhead, benefits, the whole 9 yards. So you should be paying them a rate that allows them to be responsible for those things that you don't have to pay them, so they are. So I try to make it equivalent that on on an hourly basis, it would not be any different than if they were on my payroll. It's just that I don't have to keep paying them after the project is done. And I won't go into detail on this unless someone wants me to, but I do want to flag because I often hear, oh, you don't have any tax obligations other than to send them a 1099. There are a couple of states, Pennsylvania and California are the two I know of, where there are some very odd rules about when you are required to withhold state taxes on an independent contractor. It's convoluted, it's a giant pain, but it's out there and I don't know if more states are going to start adopting it. I'm happy to answer questions, but talk to your accountant always.
Regarding taxes, I think I forgot to say that some of the grad students, you don't pay taxes for grad students. You have a contract with the university. The university pays the grad student as their employee, which is one of the values of working with a graduate assistantship or a research assistant. And another important piece to it is because they are not your employees. And I can't stress that enough. Now they are in practice, but the reality is they are not technically. They are employees of the university who are loaned to you. The workman's compensation insurance is covered by the university, or it should be. You want to make sure that that's the case. So those are the little things, because I got audited once on workman's comp just because they do that from time to time. They said, but you have these two grad assistants. And I said, they're not my employees and they are covered by workman's comp. And so I'm surprised the university doesn't want to make sure my workplace is safe, which it is, but you wonder about that. With subcontracts, the one thing I want to add is this is a great way for me. I have full-time employees who can take on a lot of work, and they do wonderful work. But when I have one-off projects that don't fit in anybody's kind of logical area, this is where I can bring in and work with. And a lot of the people who I meet on this call and through these IC Top chats are people who I've worked with for subcontracts. And so it's a wonderful way for something you're kind of exploring or investigating, or you have this weird thing, or grant writing. Like I'll bring in a grant writer as a subcontract, so it's not something that's critical to what I'm trying to do. All right, let's go to the next slide. And this is mine, I think, right, Jessica?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Part-time seasonal. So I have a great example of a part-time seasonal story. When I was first starting, I work in education consulting, so we do a lot of work in the summers, and I needed some additional staffing. So I at one of my control groups, I had the last control group meeting with this one group of teachers that said, does anybody want to come work for me? And one of them raised his hand. His name was Tom Libby, and he's working for me now, but for several summers, he worked for me seasonal work during the summers, and he did a fantastic job and worked his way into a job here. But the pro with part-time versus subcontract is the commitment to the firm. They can be focused here for that small period of time, or for the shorter time. You could be recruiting somebody who's retired, skilled support. So I actually have former clients who have retired, and they've come back and they've helped me do work and write grants and things like that. So they've got some skill. Since they're part-time seasonal, they may be focused on other things like, well, going to Las Vegas or being retired in one situation. And you do have employee taxes as opposed to your subcontracts. So there's that. But that's because they're part of your firm. Anything you want to share on that, Jessica? Anyway, go ahead.
No, not really. I haven't worked with part-time and seasonal quite as much as the other categories.
The next little slide is from the survey that we did in 2015, which I guess we should probably plan to start thinking about putting together for 2020, 2024, 2025. We did the survey. I forget what the number is, but 300 or 400 respondents. Of those people who have 2 or more employees, so a full-time firm, you see the number where you are and the kind of a reference here. So I'm in the 10 to 14 years. So this is the number of firms with 2 or more employees, just for reference, just for fun, but kind of good reference before we get into the next slide. Okay.
Which is talking about full-time employees. Yeah. So I think we can bounce back and forth, because I know we both have lots of thoughts. And I think we're both, Matt and I have talked, and we're both very pro-employee. I would say when you get to that point where you have the steady revenue, where you know you can financially support it, the value that comes from having my team members, and that's how I think of them. They're on my team. They're available all the time. We're working together. We're learning one another, is just exponentially better than sort of all the other things we've talked about. But of course, that revenue piece is the magic trigger that allows you to take that step and make this step. As I was just saying, the pros, I think that commitment to your firm, they are part of your team. I also like to emphasize the increased efficiency. I will say, even over a contractor who's very skilled and a professional at this, maybe as senior as I am, the level of efficiency and shorthand that I develop with my team members is just amazing at getting the work done over time. And over the years of working together. I don't know if you want to talk at all, Matt, about some pros from your side as well.
I started a firm with the intent of it being in existence after I retire. So the only way for that to happen is for me to hire people and encourage them to be a part of the firm and grow the firm and take over the firm eventually. So I just turned 50. I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. My goal in life has always been to make enough, save enough money so that I can choose what I want to do when I no longer want to do what I'm doing. So I am not just saying this because one of my staff members is on the call today, but I love my staff members, and I work very hard to find good people who enjoy what we're doing and fit within the firm and firm culture. But it's always been about and will always be, it's named Goshen. It's not, my name's not the name of the company. It's a bigger idea. I built it with this idea that we're going to do this thing and it will go into existence. And, that's why I have full-time employees. And I know we're going to get into the cons, but I'll introduce the cons in that it's a huge commitment. Like the whole idea of having employees is all about commitment. It is about you are paying taxes. It's a lot more expensive. It's a lot more time intensive. You've got to create all the HR pieces, which I think I'm stealing Jessica's thunder. I apologize for that, but know that it is, it's a long-term process. And, sometimes I think to myself, having all subcontractors might have been easier, but that's not who I am. That's not what I'm doing. So with that, I'll pause and let Jessica jump in.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. That commitment, I can't stress enough. And I will say, when I was considering pulling the trigger on hiring my first employee, a colleague I know who's had his firm for many, many years and has a pretty big staff said to me, he was recalling the first time he hired and the night before that employee was going to start. And he looked at his wife and said, starting tomorrow, we've got to pay that person before we pay our mortgage. And that was just like his drive at home message. And that has really stuck with me. And I will say, when COVID hit, that is when this really became real to me. Because if it had just been me, I would have been like, fine, I know my safety net, we're fine. But I work with museums. As they closed, work dried up, I was literally sleepless at night worrying about whether there was going to be a point when I couldn't continue to employ my staff. And that was real. That was real. So there is a commitment there. But it's so worth it. In the end, I'm still very glad I did it. And as Matt said, you become ready to become an HR expert. You are the HR department. Even if you're outsourcing certain functions, you need to know these laws. Like, you will be held responsible for them. At the end of the day, the buck stops with you. So you're going to need to learn them. When COVID hit, that was another time when the laws around HR and time off and what I was, all of those things, I had to really pay attention and stay on top of those, because it was very important to me to follow the law and treat my employees ethically, even though we're a small company. I think that's really important. And you are responsible for taxes, benefits, their expenses, all of those things. As Matt said, you're going to want policies in place. It can be very easy to be a loosey-goosey. We're a small firm. But man, it gives your employees such a more sense of security if stuff is written down, just the basic stuff to guide their lives and make decisions for them. Because again, this is a two-way street. We're in a relationship with them. So, you want to treat them with respect and not just hand-wave everything.
So I'm the principal researcher and firm director for my firm, and that's the way my title reads. I made it up. But the reality is I'm firm director really first, because I don't get to do as much evaluation. So this is something you might consider. If you have full-time employees, you're going to find yourself doing lots of coordination, management. You'll find a lot of time just doing supervision. So you will not have that opportunity to spend as much time doing the evaluation. You get the opportunity to read final reports and reviews. In fact, that's what I did all morning, was read and supervise folks on the work that they're doing that I originally I initiated and they're doing now. And then this afternoon, I'm going to work on an employee manual, and we're going to get our cycle is middle of September each year for employees anyway. It has to do with a large contract, but that's what I'm going to be doing this afternoon. So if that doesn't sound very exciting, then you should think about that, because that is what I'm going to do, and that is, I like it. It's different. I needed this. To be completely honest with you, I think I'm a pretty good evaluator, but I'm not a great evaluator. I'm a pretty good evaluator, and my clients love me and the evaluation that I do. But I got to a point where I loathed it. Like it was not, it was me doing this work over and over and over again by myself. That I needed people in my life, and I needed, and so I got what I asked for. And most, I'd say 99% of the time, it's great. 1% of the time, it's terrible. But you have to deal with human issues and all those things that come along with having staff. So just know that that's part of the deal. But if what I described to you sounds terrible, then think twice about having a full-time employee. All right, let's go next.
And I will say,
go ahead, Jessica.
No. I think that's really right. I think for me, I still love doing the evaluation and the research work that I do, and I am still very hands-on. It means I work a lot more. I have to communicate to my staff just because I'm working until 9 o'clock at night does not mean you need to be. But it does change the nature of that, right? And I'm handing off a lot more. And I would say one of the differences for me was having staff allowed me to do more of the evaluation and research work I was excited about because I couldn't handle it all on my own. So having a really awesome team with me means I can be involved in more projects that just really excite me. And I'm doing less of the day-to-day on it, but I'm still involved. So that's the trade.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I make that sound terrible, but I guess I've switched into, so I consider the way my firm's set up is I have kind of key areas or service lines. And so I've encouraged my staff to take on those service lines. One is like NSF, English Department of Education type of program evaluation, and one is Department of Defense and educator shortage work that we do. And so the two kind of key consultants I have are focused on those two areas. And effectively, I'm encouraging them to grow from within, and then at some point hire their own staff that will be supporting them. That's how this whole thing gets going. And that's the basis for how a consulting firm works. I think we all should know that. I'm not sure everybody really gets that. So I'm the principal, and then you have kind of like researchers or senior researchers who grow, and they can eventually become principals and they'll have staff under them. So that's the big idea for me. Anyway, go ahead to the next slide, Jessica.
I was just keeping an eye on time, so you're my questions. I won't spend time here. We can do this in the Q&A if anyone wants to know. There's been a lot of talk in this past year and a half as we've all been working remotely about the amazing opportunity of sort of recruiting from anywhere if you have a distributed team, which I do. We're spread across 3 states now. It's awesome. I love it. It also adds complications. If anyone's thinking about it, let's talk about it in the Q&A, and I can answer all sorts of questions about the headaches and how you get through them.
This was the big question, right? I had to put this little graphic in there when I originally created this because I remember this is how I felt. Should I hire a new employee? Should I create a subcontractor? In fact, this was the exact decision I was facing about 2.5 years ago. And but I chose the employee path, and just as Jessica said, you have to prioritize their salary because you can't keep a person that you don't pay. And so that first year was tight, and my wife will tell you that we had to make lots of cutbacks and costs and things like that. So we didn't have all the extra money that had to be dedicated towards that employee, but we chose it, and it's the right thing to do. So suggestions for support.
Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
Let's kind of wrap up. So I forget. I know the first one, so go ahead. So
you do that.
Alan,
I don't know if
Alan Weiss says one you need to be thinking about how. And then, ironic, Alan Weiss does not believe in employees, so he probably would not be happy with this. But thinking about how when you add people, it's incrementally better. It's not 1 + 1 = 2 because there's no point in doing that. 1 + 1 = 64, which is obviously an exaggeration. But the point is make sure when you're bringing people on, you see the net benefit. And if it's less than 1 + 1 = 2, if it's less than 2, then you should not be doing this.
And I think this one is that you want something that's complementary and not redundant of you, right? Like, so when I was first hiring, it was looking for someone at more of a junior level who could pick up the tasks that really didn't need me on them. All of the data collection didn't need to be done by me. A lot of the data analysis could be done by someone who is still growing their skills. And then, so it was a complementary skill set to mine and not, completely redundant. I don't know if there's anything to add to that, Matt.
No, I just waiting for Kurt Stoop to jump in here and say, but he does believe in redundancy because when people leave, you need to have somebody who can pick up the work. So there is some element to that, but the point is you want to find people that fit within your organization. Know your budget, and so clearly you want to know that you can afford to do this before you jump in. And so I knew I could barely do it, and I'm an optimist by trade. So, and I think you have to be an optimist. You can't do this work and go and start a business and not believe it's going to succeed. But I took a chance, but my budget was tight for the first year, and then it got better.
And I would say I've been in the shoes both even in my own company and prior, when I was looking at adding staff in an organization, where I'd often wait too long because I was nervous about that budget question. And by the time I was starting the hiring process, I was just like underwater. And so it's a timing thing. You have to know your budget, and perhaps like Matt, maybe take the leap a little early or you're going to be like me and just tread water for a couple more months until you get what you need. Number 4 is really important to me, and it is to thoroughly vet, and I added the parenthetical to Matt, which is use a hiring process. There are exceptions, of course, but I have been amazed every time I've hired, even if I had a candidate or two in mind who I thought would be a really great fit, post that job publicly. It's totally selfish. You will get applicants in that you may not have known were on the market and who are amazing fits for what you're trying to do, that you just didn't know were out there. And from an equity standpoint, it helps make sure more people have opportunities to work with you, to be part of your team, to get that foot in the door at a consulting firm. So it takes longer. I can talk about the process I use, but I highly recommend doing it. I would make exceptions, of course, but I highly recommend it if you're just sort of hiring a new staff person.
I don't have anything to add. I agree. This kind of fits under the thoroughly vet. And so your decision to hire, I forget where I heard this, was a decision not to fire that person. So when you're going through, you can hit 5.5. You need to listen to that little voice. If there's a voice telling you this isn't going to work out, then you need to listen to that little voice. I remember I was with a client who was hiring a grad assistant, and they were like ready to hire this person, and they just all they could do was find problems with it. But then they were going to hire the person, and finally one of my other client contacts who was there was like, "Listen to your little voice. If you don't think you want to hire this person, then you should not hire this person, because I'm telling you right now, it's going to get worse. So just don't do it." So you need to use your gut, but also look at all the things that you think are going to be a problem. And if your cost benefit analysis at the end of the day, it makes sense. But if there's just this nagging belief that it's not going to work, then you shouldn't hire that person.
Co-sign that 100%.
So with that, yeah, and let's show. So coming up, Ann Price is going to be doing her SOPs, standard operating procedures. I'm going to be doing networking karma the week after that, which I want to point out, that was originally when we were going to have Kylie Hutchinson. So if you signed up for September 16th, expecting to see Kylie Hutchinson, we were going to see this guy talking. We had to switch because she thought she was on September 15th, which I think I misled her to believe that because we had date issues. So we put her with the following. But you can see the rest of the different topics going through the end of the beginning of November there. So, all right, let's open it up for conversation. I'm going to ask you a question, Jessica, which I saw in the comments. Do you use a lawyer to create contracts for subcontractors, or does that even apply to you? Because I can answer.
That's a great question. I think you definitely want a contract. I don't really use a a lawyer. I have a standard subcontract template I use that I think is pretty plain language. I think is protecting me and protecting them and just sort of laying all this out. But absolutely, I do a contract with subcontractors. I think it's actually another important part of the smell test for the IRS regulations. Having a contract that bounds what they're doing and not doing is sort of part of that process.
I think I'm going to do what Ian Price did a couple months ago and ask everybody to give a thumbs up if they've had a lawyer review their subcontract process. And almost nobody put their thumbs up. If you did, go ahead. Julie did. Give her thumbs up. All right, you can do this. You can do like Gretchen did there. Okay, so I have subcontracts that I put in place. I have contracts that are reviewed by and developed by lawyers. It's expensive, but I've developed my subcontracts without a lawyer's review. So I do think I need to get better at that, particularly since I think I'm getting the session on contracting coming up. So I got to get my act together before I do this session.
So I do.
Admittedly, because I worked in other firms before I went out on my own, I had lots of templates to sort of borrow from. I'd read this language like hundreds of times, and so I'm like, made the guess of the scene.
So Kurt, before you jump in here, I'm gonna stop the recording and tell everybody goodbye. And that way, I'm gonna encourage people to stop in and to get some sessions. So thanks for attending our session today, YouTubers. But everybody else stick around.